Alright, chapter 3.4 is the last section that we're going to be doing for this chapter here. It is a bigger chapter in the book, but there's a lot of stuff in there that we won't be doing for our algebra. So again, this is it. We'll be doing this section for 3 days. Today I'm going to introduce you to the information. Tomorrow we'll go a little bit further, get some ugly numbers in there, and then the next day, which will be Monday, we will look at some word problems and see how all that's applied. You'll then have 2 days of review followed by a test, and we'll get ready to go. Actually, I guess Tuesday, because we're not in school Monday. Anyway, today we're going to face a problem that requires a solid grasp of substitution and elimination. It will also require some courage and creativity. These two things are going to be key, as you'll see later on. Looking at these following problems here, these are still systems of equations, but what you notice is that you have an A, a B, a C, a B, and a C, which means we now have 3 variables. You in the second one have ABC, ABC, and ABC, and then the third one, which looks even more different, XYZ, XYZ, and then YZ. So these equations represent a challenge because there are now 3 different variables to work with, and that is something different to us. But if you think about our evolution from chapter 2 to chapter 3, we started out with the idea that we could only truly solve an equation with one variable. Here we know to subtract 6, 2x equals 4, and you don't need to write this, but again, we know that we can do it if we have one variable. That's part of what chapter 2 is about, was mastering our ability to solve with one variable. Then we moved to chapter 3, and all of a sudden we saw 2 variables, which again, it wasn't just the first time you had seen it, because you should have seen it in Algebra 1 also, but then they move you here. And so your job now that we have 2 variables, because we cannot solve this, we cannot solve that, but with 2 variables, and as long as we have 2 equations, we can manipulate the material to get rid of one variable. One thing we learned to do was to substitute, and again, you might want to write this, but what happens is there's 2 variables in this equation, so we can't solve it. There's 2 variables in this equation, so we can't solve it, but we can put 3x plus 2x plus 1 equals 6. Again, 3 dots means from there, notice we have one variable and one equation. We can solve that. Or the other thing we learned to do was, if something could eliminate, we simply added like terms, got 5x, crossed this out, 7 and 11 made 18, and again 3 dots means that we can now solve for x because we now have one variable and one equation. So again, your evolution was we can only solve, or make sure you can solve an equation with one variable. Then up to this point we've been doing 2 variables with 2 equations, so now that we have 3 variables, again you must have 3 equations, but again you just have to shift the system now to create one of these situations, and then you'll go work your way down. So in other words, what you did before was you started in this level. This was solving. Then you moved higher to substitution, elimination, and then all this is going to be 3 variables. So what you should notice is when there are 3 variables, you're going to convert into a substitution or elimination problem, and then you're going to work your way down to solve, and then you're going to work your way all the way back out. So everything is still going to be pretty much the same. It's just going to be, again, your ability to choose what's going to happen. So now that we have 3 variables, again, we must shift the system. So we're not going to solve this, but I just want to show you what we're talking about. What I like to do whenever I have a system is just focus on x and y. You do not have to focus on x and y. That's why I said courage and creativity. But for me, if I do the same thing most of the time, then I'm going to be right most of the time. And so my idea is that I'm going to always try to eliminate z. And if you look at this, you have a positive z here and a negative z there. So what you will do is you will write the first equation, and you'll write the second equation, and you will add your terms. So you end up with 2x plus 2y, that goes away, equals 10. Now what you cannot do is stack the same 2 equations. So if I use the first and second, then now the only thing I can do is either use the first and third or second and third. Looking at my z's again, the easiest way to do it would be the second and third. So x plus y minus z equals 4. Again, I draw a line through my z so I don't confuse it for a 2. And then x plus 2y plus z equals 7. Again, adding my like terms, I get 2x plus 3y, those cancel, equals 11. And what I can now do with these 2 equations I made is I can stack them up. And notice we now have a system that we can use elimination on. So from here, we would now eliminate our x's. As you can see, you could switch, find your y's. Once you find your y, you would plug it back in here to find x, and then once you have x and y, you can plug in x and y back to your original and find your way back to z. That is what I meant when I gave you that picture where I said you're going to have your three variables, you're going to create a system that's either here, you're going to go down and solve it, and then you're going to work your way all the way back up to get all three of your answers. Again, it's just a patience thing. It just takes a little bit of practice, but again, as long as you stick with it, I think you should be fine. Our success with this type of system requires us to make a decision and stick with it. There are going to be plenty of options to use. As I said, you could stack those equations either way you wanted, but it's best to make sure you avoid thinking about other options while working out another. That's kind of a life lesson. But anyway, if you choose the easier option, that's fine. But if you happen to choose the tougher option, you'll make it as long as you don't make a mistake. The problem is if you start to choose a tougher option, don't go halfway through the tougher option, then realize, hey, this might be the tougher one. Stop all your work and then go back, because how do we know that there is an easier option than what you chose? That is why if you make a decision, stick to it, go all the way through. Just try your best not to make a mistake. And again, as long as you follow all the rules of algebra we've discussed, you will eventually find the answer. Now on these examples, I will admit you might want to get a piece of paper for each of these three, because I forgot as I was making this that substitution does take up, or I'm sorry, three variables does take up a little bit of space. So I will try my best to fit what I can and organize it, but you might want to get a piece of paper before moving on and just kind of staple it to this at the end of the day, because again, this is important information we're going to go through, and the better you organize it for your learning, the better off you're going to be. So I'm going to be going in a downward direction as we work. Here I have an A and a B, an A and a C, and these are the three examples we looked at. An A and a B, an A and a C, and a B and a C. And in this case, I'm going to choose A and B as my variables. So, if I want A and B as my variables, this equation's already where I want it to be. But if I look at this one, I could actually stack these two equations up, 8A plus 2C equals 16, and then 6B plus 2C equals 24. Now notice what I did here. I did not want to stack A over B because that's not a good thing. So what I'm doing instead is I have my A slot, the B slot, and the C slot here. And what I can do now is, because I want these to be negative, I'm going to switch the bottom row and end up with 8A minus 6B, that cancels, equals, I believe, negative 8. So I have this equation here, I'll put a star by. And I have this equation here, I'll put a star by, because remember, you need two equations. And so from there, I will go off to the side and I will work out that problem. So 4A plus 7B equals 36, and 8A minus 6B equals negative 8. Work it out the way you were taught, which is multiply this by 2, getting 8A, 14B, and 72. 8A minus 6B equals negative 8. Switch your signs around, ending up with that canceling out, 20B here, and 80, which is nice whenever we have nice numbers. That is what tomorrow is going to be about more than anything else, is the ugly numbers. So we get B equals 4. Once you get B equals 4, go back to one of your equations here, because that's how you're going to find the second equation, and go ahead and plug it in. So I'm going to go ahead and use the 4A plus 7B equals 36, which means I now put 4A plus 7 times 4 equals 36, which means 4A plus 28 equals 36. And again, now I'm going to kind of use a shortcut and not show you the stuff, but 4A is equal to 8. Therefore, A is equal to 2. I also would recommend that you circle your answers or put some sort of a mark so you know where those answers are. And the last letter we have to find is C. And so, as I said, you must now go all the way back up and back to your originals and see which ones have C. You could use either one of these two because they have a C in it. I'm going to use the second one, which says that 8A plus 2C equals 16. I'm going to turn my A into a 2, so 16 plus 2C equals 16. Subtracting 16, that means 2C equals 0, which means that C is equal to 0. And the final answer would look like this, 2, 4, 0, because that is, again, how we would look at that. again, 240, X, Y, and Z. I'm sorry, A, B, and C. You always will alphabetize A first, B second, C third, and that is your three variable elimination, or three variable systems. But again, looking at that before we move through this, all we did was simply use these three to pick two letters so that we could create a system. So we got A and B here, stacked it with the A and B here, and did all the work that we were used to. This portion of work here, and don't mark it up, but this portion of work here is what we did up to this point. The only difference is after we do this work, we then have to take these two answers back to the very top and finish it off. So again, make sure you get practice, make sure you ask questions, because that is going to be crucial for you today. This is a little tougher because again, it's not going to be nearly as easy, but let's do it. I am again going to pick A and B. And so I'm going to eliminate my C's, which means I'm going to probably look at these two because I think that's easy to get rid of. So 4A plus 3B plus C equals negative 7. A minus 3B plus 2C equals 12. Now I know we think we can eliminate this, but I probably wouldn't do that. Again, I would rather go ahead and stick with A and B, even though I'm kind of tempted to get rid of that. So we're going to multiply this. Oh no, I'm not going to multiply that by 2. No, I am. Because looking at C's, I have a 2C here, and I want to multiply this by 2. I have a regular C here. I can leave that alone. So I am focusing here. I end up with 8A plus 6B plus 2C equals negative 14. I end up with A minus 3B plus 2C equals 12. I then switch all my signs around, and I end up with 7A 9B equals negative 26. I am then going to stack this one with that one because again I think that'll be easy to get rid of. So 4A 3B plus C equals negative 7, and 11A minus 2B plus 3C equals 41. Again, I'm going to multiply the top by 3 because I want to make these C's match, and I get 12A 9B 3C negative 21. I get 11A minus 2B plus 3C equals 41. I switch all of my signs around. That ends up with A 11B gone equals negative 62. Again, here's one equation. Here's another equation. We will now stack those up. 7A 9B equals negative 26. And you now have your system. For the sake of time, I'm going to put my 3 dots here because again, what you would do here is do your work, find A, find B. Once you find A and B, you would then go back and work that out. And again, I'll probably work that out for you in person if you want, but again, the bottom line is the hard part is getting from 3 variables, 3 equations, down to 2 variables and 2 equations. But I do notice now that the time is up to about 13 minutes, and I'd rather go ahead and get you to your notes. But again, here is where we are, where we would do our elimination. We'd probably multiply the bottom equation by 7, do our work, find A and B, doing what we know how to do, then go all the way back up to find the third. Last one. I usually like X and Y are the first two, but I notice here that I have a Y and Z equation, which means that if I choose Y and Z and I eliminate my X, then I already have one variable done. So I'm going to do 5X minus 2Y plus 8Z equals 22, and I'm going to do X plus 4Y plus Z equals 17. Again, if I am looking for Y and Z, that means I want to eliminate X. So this time around, I'm going to go ahead and get rid of my x's. So 5x minus 2y plus 8z equals 22. And then 5x, 20y, 5z, and I think that is 17 times. That'd be 70. I want to make sure. Don't want to mess up now. 17 times 5 is, that's not good, 85. Yep. I got 2,000 in the calculator, which told me something was wrong. Switch all your signs, combine your terms, you end up with negative 22y plus 3z equals negative 63, I believe. And again, this is your part here. This is also your part here. And so what we can now do is stack 2y minus z equals 5 and negative 22y plus 3z equals negative 63. Again, those three dots means from here we know how to eliminate one of our variables. We know how to find y. We know how to find z. Maybe it'll take some work, but then once you find y and z, you then take those answers way back up to the top, plug your y and your z in to find your x. Alright? So, other than that, like I said, go ahead and use this time now to get some practice, pick out a problem, work with it. Again, you have 3 days, you have 2 days this week followed by a quiz. Then you've got Saturday, Sunday, and Monday, so you've got pretty much 5 days to kind of get this down. So attack it now, get your questions out of the way now, get your frustration out of the way now. That way, whenever it's time to really get to it next week with word problems, you'll be ready to go. I think once you really get into it and you actually come to me with patience and you're able to ask your question and I can walk you through it, you will start to understand what's going on. But other than that, like I said, go on to your Math XL and let's try it out. Good luck.